Welcome to the Village of Buchanan workshop meeting of Tuesday, April 26, 2022, and also the continuation of our budget hearing. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Before we get started, I'd like to amend the agenda to add a resolution. We'll do it under number 4 to make an appointment. We did appointments at our organizational meeting, but what we have to do is with board approval. So I would like to add that resolution on for number 4. So the first thing we're going to discuss is the budget, continuation of the budget hearing. So I'm making a motion to open the budget hearing.
Make a motion to continue the budget hearing.
Okay, can I have a second, please? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that is open. I will leave it open for the board members first. If anyone has any comments, we did have a public hearing on Wednesday, April 5th. And we had a lot of discussions on our budget and a lot of comments were made. And I don't know if the board members, anyone else has any other comments?
I just had one question under legal. I didn't notice, I had spoken to Marcus about this earlier also. There was no budget line for legal counsel for negotiating of the pilot. I know in March, we were going to have a resolution to hire a firm to assist us in the negotiation. That resolution was pulled. So I was just wondering if we were going to have, we had a resolution to hire a firm
For the pilot for
negotiating of the pilot.
Indian Point?
Yeah. For
We've
Holton.
gone in a different direction.
You went in a different direction,
Oh,
and there's no budget line right now for any consult or any representation or any assistance in that. I was wondering if we were going to use it, whether it was going to come out of a contingency fund or what the plan was.
I think because we've gone in a different direction and we seem to be making some progress on that, we're not going to be, how can I say this? Hiring outside counsel. Hiring outside counsel. So I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, Marcus and Stephanie, but I don't think we're going to need funding for that. I would agree.
Okay.
One thing I do want to mention, we had a situation in the village. One of our officers that was going to be retiring the end of this year has hurt himself on the job. He has hurt his elbow in the vehicle on the laptop, and he's out on disability right now. And we feel, and the board will be discussing this, that it's important that we look to hire an officer soon. And so we're going to put that money in the budget because the officer who's out is going to still continue to be paid and to help with the overtime. The board will be talking about it, but I think it would probably be a good idea to get the replacement moving. So I'm just going to read some numbers here. So the tax levy before this happened was $4,227,000 and $672. Now it's 4.3. The tax rate went from 602.97 to 614.72. The tax increase from 68.21 to 79.26. So our tentative tax increase before this happened was 12.77. If we hire this new officer, and the additional cost would be for the 6-month time frame from June 1st to December 31st would be $82,000. So our taxes would go from 12.77, what we had planned on doing, to 14.95. The average tax increase would go from $2.99 to $3.51. And the average tax increase per month from $24.95 to $29.30. So this incident changed our situation of where we were with our budget. And I just wanted to let people know where we are right now with that. And we looked, the board has looked through it. They've asked questions. We've looked, if there were any way we could do any savings. And that's as close as we could come. Any other comments from the board?
I have nothing.
All right. So I'm going to the audience. Does anyone have any comments about our budget? Our proposed?
Want to see anybody online? No hands are raised online either.
That's it. And we are going to do this evening because our budget has to be passed before May 1st. And so this will be for starting June 1st, 2022 to May 31st of 2023, our budget year. So with no other comments or questions, I'd like to make a motion to close the budget hearing. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, now I'd like to make a motion to adopt the 2022-2023 budget and also the water rates that we also discussed. So on a motion to approve the budget and water rates,
I make a motion to approve the 2022-2023 budget as well as water rates.
okay, and a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
On a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, on a question, yes, sir.
Last year, we had an issue with transferring the water rates to the tax base based on the municipal law that was extended by the governor for the COVID. Have we received remedy to that? We're allowed to automatically do, so then we can't
We can't,
transfer the
re-
water
we
rates.
can't, we can't re, no, we cannot re-levy the
Okay.
outstanding delinquent water onto the taxes.
So we're just doing the cost of the water, not the movement of the
That's
rate.
correct.
Okay, thanks.
And that number is increasing. Cindy can tell you that number is becoming concerning because they won't have the cash flow in the water to pay our bills. So it is a concerning factor right now. So we might have to deal with, hopefully that expires this year and then we could discuss doing something next year.
Well, there's no legislation that prevents us from increasing the fines for late payments, correct?
That's correct. You can
So-
do anything with what, but the problem is that people are not paying their water bills at all. It's
Okay.
over the-
That's okay. We could charge them extra then.
I love that idea.
All right, thanks.
So we're gonna have to see what we can do to collect that. Funds. All right. And because I think at the next meeting, we should have a list of people that are delinquent in their water
Mhm.
accounts. So we'll have an idea of what the totals are then.
Yeah, hopefully when the governor rescinds that order, then we can maybe have a meeting throughout the year and then try re-levy at a different time of the year. And we
Okay.
can bring that back to the board at that point.
Okay, fine. Okay, all in favor?
All right,
Aye.
Okay, so the addition of the resolution, Village of Buchanan Resolution Annual Appointments, the following are appointments of officials made by Mayor Teresa Knickerbocker, subject to board approval. All appointments are for 1-year term except where otherwise noted. Village Clerk Treasurer Cynthia Kempter, Village Deputy Clerk Sharon Murphy, Associate Village Justice Daniel O'Neill, and Village Prosecutor Joseph Ruyak. On a motion to approve these annual appointments, please.
make a motion to approve the annual appointments.
Okay, can I have a second
Second.
on question? All in favor?
All right,
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Aye, aye,
Thank
aye.
you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for completing that.
Okay, so on our now we're moving on to our workshop agenda. And this evening we have a presentation by AMS Acquisitions. And who is here to do the presentation?
There you go, right behind you.
is your microphone on?
Is it on?
I don't know. Can anybody-
Sounds-
It's good?
yeah, it
Yeah, I
sounds
hear
like
you.
it is.
You're good. Okay.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the board,
My name is Mark Weingarten. I'm a partner in the law firm of Del Bello, Dinellen, Weingarten, Wise, and Whitaker in White Plains. And it's my pleasure to be here this evening representing AMS Acquisitions LLC in connection with its proposal to redevelop the 5-acre site on Albany Post Road and Craft Lane in Buchanan, New York. You may notice that on our presentation that was behind me a moment ago.
Yeah, hold on, I'm going to share the screen with the public, that's why.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
I was just going to mention, we had it captioned as 3119 Albany Post Road. That is the closest business address. That's where the hardware store is off of Craft, but we don't actually have an address. So we're the property behind there, the 5 acres. We'll show you on a map. Marcus,
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
It's okay. Actually, you can flip a couple to slide 3. There we go. That's good. That's fine. I'm joined tonight by a number of people. We have with us one of the principals, Rafi Mitnick, as well as Ryan Sutherland and Raymond Hidea, who are here from AMS. You'll also hear briefly in a few moments from Mark Creedon, a co-managing principal at Perkins Eastman, who are our architects the design together for us. That's a sneak peek, and we'll go through the particulars of it. I do want to mention at the start that Michael Mitnick, the co-founder and principal of AMS, was intending to be here tonight. He doesn't feel well, and we don't encourage anyone in the world we're living in to come to public meetings these days. So he gives his apologies, and he will be meeting with you soon. We can go over to the next slide if you don't mind, Marcus. So just briefly, we'll talk about AMS. It's a real estate investment firm focused on acquisition and development of prime real estate locations in the tri-state area. It was founded in 2012 by Michael Mitnick and Abraham Abadi. AMS has built a portfolio of development projects in all asset classes throughout New York City and has also acquired approximately 750,000 square feet of Class A office space in Connecticut. AMS recently shifted its focus to Westchester and New Jersey's suburban locations. In some, AMS has grown exponentially in this region, with more than $1 billion of development transactions aggregating more than 1 million square feet in recent times. I say this to you, and we're going to go through a few of the other projects that they've been working on in the area. As an attorney who's represented developers throughout my career for many decades now, I'm sorry to say it's that long, but it is. One of the things that I think is very important for a local community to understand when they get into a new project like this is who they're doing business with and who they're partnering with for this type of investment in your community. I've represented AMS for a while now. I'd like to say with our clients, the best thing to do is to go talk to the elected officials in the areas that we're going to show you where their projects are. They'll be the best reference because these are people who not only do a project, but once they invest in a community, they continue to invest in the community, protect their assets, and do more projects. So we think they have a great reputation, and we'd be happy for you to check that out. Let's move on to the next slide, Marcus. So we'll take you through a couple of the projects they've done. We're just showing you, they've done some high-end condo projects in New York City. This is called the Kenmar. We'll move to the next slide. This is a project that I'm intimately familiar with. It's a master plan for the downtown city of Yonkers. It's the largest project in Yonkers in quite some time. It's 3,500 units over 3 project sites. It's very exciting. We actually just finished our DEIS public hearings. It's gone very well, and we're moving through that process with the city and getting acquainted with them here in Westchester County. We'll show you that. These are the 3 project sites. This is Teutonio Hall, right on the Hudson River down by the train station. It is 2 41-story towers with approximately 900 multifamily units, 10,000 square feet of commercial and various sundry parking, et cetera, and infrastructure. Next slide, Marcus. The next slide is the Chicken Island site, a much larger site, more inland, closest to where City Hall is. That site consists of 5 buildings from 23 to 38 stories containing 2,000 multifamily apartments, approximately 70,000 square feet of commercial space and various medical space, et cetera, with adequate parking. And the next slide, finally, the third site is the North Broadway site, which consists of 650 multifamily and townhouse residential units and accompanying retail and medical office space. Next slide. Over in Jersey, we have in Sayreville, Gillette Towers, 136 luxury apartments that were completed in a beautiful community that's been built there. The next slide, Marcus, actually, it's the next 2. In Summer, we call it Summer Hill, which is in East Brunswick, which is under construction. That's a 96-unit site. And then the next 2 slides, Marcus, are the final project, which we call Evesham, which is in pre-development, which is a 96-unit project that's under construction there. There we go. That's in pre-development for that one. So to give you a sense, those are the types of things that they do. They're in that world of building a lot of residential communities, and they're able to carry out when they make commitments, those types of things. Here, what we're going to do, and we showed you a sneak peek of it, and Mark's going to take you through the plan. We're proposing a project on the 5 acres for 148 luxury housing apartments, 1 and 2 bedrooms, very important when we get to things like school children generation and those discussions, 175 parking spaces, and we'll show you more in detail with upscale amenities. We recognize that our proposal, I want to say at the start, does not comply with the zoning that's currently on the site. We would like to acquaint you, we're telling you who we are as a team. We want to acquaint you with the proposal and its specifics. When that's all finished, we can get down and talk about whatever you would like as far as the particular issues. But we know that the zoning, which currently is C1 and M1, does not work for this. There would have to be a change. And of course, we'll have discussions regarding density, height, wetlands, school children generation, the access to the hardware store, mixed use, and whatever else people would like to discuss with us. But we're sure it'll be a lively discussion. So we look forward to that. I'm going to ask Mark Reed to come up and just take you through the specifics of the plan.
Marcus, is there any way that we can turn the TV so that people
Mike, would you mind?
can you, yeah, just even if you could put it up against the wall?
Well, I have this monitor here that's showing.
Yeah, they have
Oh,
another
Oh,
monitor.
I'm sorry, I didn't see. All right, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. I can't see it through what we have seen here. Thank you.
That's all right. Thank you, Mark. Madam Mayor, members of the board, thank you for having me here tonight. Really appreciate the time. We're excited about the project. We're excited about being involved in the project. Perkins Eastman, we can go to the next slide, Mark, please. Thank you. I think one more after that. Yes, thank you. Perkins Eastman has been doing work in Westchester County for many, many years. This is my 4th decade being an architect. I hate to say it. We love the work. We've done essentially probably the last few years, 18 different projects in Westchester County and counting still. We have several projects in planning as well as many in construction. It equates to about 4,500 units in Westchester County alone. The firm's headquarters in New York. We have about 500 people in the tri-state area. And I'm working in conjunction with the New York office and the Stanford office as well. This is just a handful of the projects that we're currently in design or under construction in Westchester. Go to the next slide. We're going to jump into the project. Now the site area, that shows the site area. There's Albany Post Road to right you on the bottom of the sheet. North is just to the left with Craft Lane. And you can see the hardware store and the other structures adjacent to the site. The site area, go to the next slide, please. Site area is a little over 5 acres. As Mark had mentioned, about 230,000 square feet. When we look at sites, we sort of look at major site features. This site's very interesting. It has, on one hand, has water, has the lake front. It has a 100-foot setback from the lake that we're aware of. It has a large feature of topography, right? There's a hill on the site that rises up. There's power lines that run along as well. And there's adjacent structures, and there's currently 2 access points to the site, one off Craft Lane, and the other is off Albany Post Road. Again, sort of just to reiterate sort of more graphically, kind of the basic features of the site. We have the lake shore, the 100-foot setback, the topography rising up to the power lines beyond, the existing structures to be aware of as we plan the site. Building metrics, we'll review one more time. Mark touched on them earlier. The buildings are very similar. They're not cookie cutter. They're not stamped the same. They're oriented differently because they respond to the site conditions. Both footprints are about the same size. They're about 19,500 square feet and 5 stories. 78,000 square foot, that is a residential program, the units, if you will. 19,500 of that is parking in common areas with about 74 units in each building. I'm sorry, Marcus. Yeah, I
Which slide you want me to go to?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm looking at my phone. Sorry. Go ahead. 2 slides.
Tell me when to stop.
Next one. There we go. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Thank you. And the building C is about 5,000 square foot of amenities, clubhouse function space. In terms of site access, we've terraced the parking on the site. It's landscaped. We've also tucked some of the parking underneath the buildings as well to recoup that as we carve into the hillside slightly. We gather that and park underneath it and put storage underneath the buildings as well. Parking is, we have 148 units and 175 spaces. It equates a little over 1.1, almost 1.2 units of parking per unit. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the site circulation. So it's two-way site circulation throughout the site. We're anticipating the main entry off Craft Lane, just because you can obviously, it's pulled away from the corner. So access to Albany Post Road is easier. You can stack up in and out. Egress is much easier there than on Albany Post Road. Again, we're keep reminding ourselves, we've got that 100-foot setback from the lake near Building C. We're looking at probably sort of extending some landscape features, terracing the pool, but perhaps in that setback, but we're keeping the building structure itself away from that. We mentioned two-way parking throughout the site. The current access off Albany Post Road, right now we're looking at landscape. It could also potentially be emergency access if that's a requirement of the fire marshal. Next slide, please. Mark, you're going to talk about the zoning table in more detail?
You can take it for the rest of the renderings. I can go back to that.
Okay, all right, we'll just go ahead. One more slide. If you please. So this is an aerial view looking across Albany Post Road at the two buildings. You can see how they're shaped. One kind of embraces the hillside beyond. The other embraces the access to the amenities building in the lake. Next slide. A little bit of a close-up of that same view. The materiality of both buildings, they're similar materials, but they're actually different colors, right, and different patterning. So the buildings also differentiate both in the form as well as materials used. Just making some stone veneer, some clapboarding, different materials that are very residential in feel. And the style, if somebody wants to call it style, is sort of a transitional style. It melts both traditional, also sort of more of the current view that tenants are looking for today. Next slide, please. Thank you. And this is the view. You see the clubhouse amenities building on the lower left side. Then the two buildings as they sort of zigzag their way up the hill and up the side. I think that's what we had for you, and we're going to come back to the zoning, Mark. Thank you.
You want to go back to the table?
You can, but to be honest with you, it's almost not relevant for the discussion because it's really in concept that we're talking about concept now and what would be willing to do. But as you know, as Mark said, we've done a lot of work with his office over the years, and I think they do a very nice job. I think what's important to note is I live in Goldens Bridge. I live in northern Westchester. This is a change in the world. When I was starting in this business, we built multifamily housing in urban areas down in the southern part of Westchester. We built single-family homes in the bedroom communities up in northern Westchester. That's changed. It's people have different desires as to whether they want to be homeowners. There are people, particularly younger people, that want to live in apartments. As you notice, we were talking about 1- and 2-bedroom apartments. So we're not talking about apartments for families. We're talking about young adults. We're talking about empty nesters. It's a different people in transition. Those are the types of people that are renting these days. It sounds strange, but we've had this. We've gone through this in other areas of your neighbors. So for example, I remember we were met with really in Somers, you want to build 150 apartments in Somers on Route 6. Do you really want to do that? And Avalon Bay built in Somers and it's been an extremely successful community. Same thing happened again. I'm using another Perkins Eastman, Del Bello, Danilo Weingarten project that was Avalon Bay up in Ossining on Route 9. People said the same thing. You want to build multifamily housing on Route 9. Is that going to work? A wonderfully flourishing community where actually now they're complaining that the rents have gone up too high because it's been so successful in that community itself. And there are many other examples. So the bottom line is the zoning codes that are currently in place in many of the communities up in northern Westchester are not yet reflecting this, and they're just starting to, and they are being changed. We believe strongly that there's a market for this and that people will want to come to Buchanan. And what's important to understand is, and that's what's been happening in these other places, this is what solidifies, in our opinion, your commercial tax base. You need people with income moving into your moving into your community. They're going to live here, not necessarily with school children to put the burden on the services, but people who will pay taxes, will go to your restaurants, will go to your retail. And those are the types of things, but you need the people first. And it's hard to understand that you need to do that first before the rest of it comes. But we can show you examples of it throughout Westchester County where this has been successful and it has solidified places because now you have a place where if somebody wants to locate a business, they know there's a place for their employees to be. If somebody wants to open a restaurant, they know there's a place nearby where there's going to be more customers, there's going to be some more population. So that's really the concept of the market and the reason that AMS is looking here and believes in Buchanan as a place for this type of a use. And we're here to discuss and find out. We're really, it's an interesting kind of thing, but I always tell my clients the next best answer to yes is no. We don't want to hear maybe go through 3 years and find out the answer is no. We're here to really do due diligence have an open dialogue and find out what's achievable. And then you'll let us know. And if we can come to something that would works for everyone, we'd be very interested in finding consensus and being able to build something in the community and make that investment. That's the end of our presentation, but of course, we're open for questions.
All right, thank you. No, thank you for coming in with the presentation. I just, the board, we're gonna ask questions and we're not making any commitments at this point. We're just gonna ask questions. But one of the things I'm sure you're aware, we just completed an overlay district.
Mhm.
And you know what the requirements of that were, 3 stories high
Mhm.
and commercial on the bottom floor.
Right.
5 stories, I don't know if I could go for that, honestly. I'm just not sure. I had an issue when we were doing the overlay district with the height of the buildings as it was, especially on the other side of the road. So I don't know, that's my thoughts on it.
Well, I'll make, those are 2 separate thoughts and
Mhm.
I'll separate them out. I can tell you one thing for certain, the project's not going to work with commercial on the bottom and residential above for a couple of reasons. One is there's not enough parking. So you would have to have a much larger site because we're asking for parking relief for this, for the number of units we're doing, just the residential. You wouldn't be able to fit them both. And secondly, and we've been doing this throughout Westchester County, we've done some of that. There have been some areas in the urban areas like Harrison, for example, their train station site, and you put the retail in, and unfortunately it's remaining vacant for a period of time. And until you get the population in, it will eventually repopulate. So we believe you first have to prove this out with the residential and then the commercial will follow it, but not necessarily on the site. So that's 1. 2, as far as density, height is concerned, and I understand those things, we will find out from you what it is that you're willing to allow us to do, and we'll have to make the economic determination as to whether it will justify the investment that will be required to do this. So that's what we're here to find out. We believe this project works. If there's a different project or something similar that you're going to ask us to consider, we would certainly, not tonight, but we would go back, we would put our, sharpen our pencils and see if it's something that we could work out. So those are
Because
obviously
that's
very
important
legitimate
that we
points.
maintain our village character.
Understood.
And I'm glad you did mention about the commercial because that was a concern of mine also with having all commercial on the bottom because we don't want to see vacant commercial businesses.
Right.
That doesn't help the community either.
Mhm.
But the main goal here is that we're going to maintain our village character.
Okay.
So we don't want to have 20-story buildings next to a single house.
Well, that's why we didn't have to suggest a 20-story building. So we came in with 5. We understand that. And again, I think I would recommend that you also go take a look at some of the residential development that has been happening in similar communities to yours up here on Route 9, for example, in the Ossining area that's not downtown, but it's on Route 9 and some other places, and take a look at what's there and what's being built and whether you think that's something that, it's to say 3 stories, 5 stories, hard to imagine. Get there, stand on Route 9, take a look and see what you think works or doesn't work. And then you'll decide whether or not you think that genuinely changes the character of your community. I don't, but you may, so we'll have that conversation.
I saw one of the slide presentations. I believe you had one of the locations on one of the prior projects was in Mamaroneck. Is that the one on Mamaroneck Avenue?
That Mamaroneck was one of the Perkins Eastman projects that was not, it's not one of the AMS projects. So that
Okay.
was that the Avalon project?
No, that's what it was.
It was a different one. Who was in Mamaroneck?
I don't recall what that was, Mark.
Those were just some
Okay.
that was just some background
So that
on the
wasn't
architecture firm
project,
as to
it
what
was
the
just a similar
architecture firm
project that you were
was.
trying to, okay.
Exactly. Trying to show that we know what we're doing.
Well, I was one of the people who was vocally against the increase as of right density that was originally proposed for the C1, C2 overlay district, which was originally proposed for 12 units per acre. Specifically, because of one of the things that you had mentioned would be relatively, I think it was like 10 or 15% would have been 3 bedrooms. And that would have disproportionately impacted the school district. And part of the original as of right was removing the commercial component to it. And we did increase the as of right population density as long as we were able to maintain a 50% square footage for commercial to help offset the services that would be provided by the increased population density. So I'm having a little bit of an issue with 140 units. I believe you had 60 or so as 2-bedroom or greater, or 40 or so. What, I forget what 30% of the project. If you look at our school district budget, we're one of the highest in New York State. If you go by the pure budget numbers, it's around $35,000 or $36,000 per student. If you use a Seneca formula, it's around $27,000 per student. And having that high density would be somewhat difficult for me to approve.
So I totally understand what you're saying. I can tell you that I've been dealing with this on a weekly basis for decades at this point. And I'm going to tell you the one story of the project that I had in Greenberg, if I might, it take a couple of minutes, but just to give you a sense of it. But one of the very first projects that we did was a large project that the first time it was proposed was at 900 units. It went on for many years in the town of Greenberg. It was in the Elmsford School District. And there was a lot of opposition to it going on for it. And finally, they decided to allow the first 108 units to go forward. There was a big negotiation, there was litigation, and moratoriums, the whole bit. And they allowed the 108 units to go forward of multifamily, similar style. I think it was 4 stories, that kind of thing that was there. Long story short, they built 108 units. They waited a year and a half while the fighting was still going on over the additional units. They did an audit. There were, of the 108 units, there were 3 public school children in the community that came in. And after that, they approved another 444 units in the second phase. And when we finished, they asked us and had us, the Elmsford School District made a petition for us to take what we had put aside as open space and build another 75 units because it was the best thing that ever happened to the school district. So I understand your way of thinking, and that may very well be your community, and you'll determine on how this goes. But what I can tell you, and I would ask you to look at, is rather than say how many stories is character, but like density, let's concentrate on what that means. How many school children? Is there traffic? It's what are those impacts that come? Because you can design projects in a way that will lessen those impacts so that I can have more units than you would not necessarily be comfortable with, but less school children, less cars, depending on how you go about doing it in a certain way. So that's what we would work with you on. But the typical apartment sizes that are being built here are not of a size or large enough that you would typically get families and that kind of thing. And there are things we might be able to do. For example, if you negotiate a pilot that Marcus is very familiar with, that we did, for example, in Dobbs Ferry, where there were catch points, where we did it at the Yonkers School District. You remember that was on a project that we worked on for Lincoln Properties, where we actually had it where if there was a certain number of school children that was exceeded, the taxes went up, the pilot payments went up to offset. And there are ways to do that as well if you're open to those kinds of discussions. Not something I've spoken to my client about, but there are solutions to that if we work together and say, what are your concerns? And then can we come up with ways that are legal to come up with agreements that would protect you from the impacts that you would have concerns over.
Well, if you could put together some quantitative data that would show cost benefit analysis for
Yes.
us, that would be, that would help us in the decision-making process, because we don't want to be a community that subsidizes a development.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there has to be a benefit to the residents.
I would expect that a project like this going through a rezoning would require an environmental review, and the environmental review would require a socioeconomic analysis from an expert that would come in and go through all those numbers. And that's
Yeah,
something what we would do.
Okay. But the other thing we have on that site, as you had mentioned, was the steep slopes. The majority of that is rock in that area. Back in the 70s, there was a project to be postulated there. And a large portion of those was blasted back in probably like 75 or 76. So there are some steep slopes there. And that would also, you would need relief from that. And part of our code for steep slopes, if you go back where that road that enters, if you look directly to your left, you're going to see almost a sheer rock face. That was blasted rock about 40 years ago.
I think, and I don't recall, you're right, I think we've respected the steep slopes. I don't, Mark.
So you're
I
not
don't remember
encroaching
exa-
on the
I don't-
steep
I don't
slopes
know
at all?
that as a fact. I'm asking Mark if he
So
knows.
we're still waiting for the civil report.
Okay.
on that part. So we are in the toe of that bill, certainly, because we're trying to accommodate the parking that's required as much as we can. We're also trying to, stay in that sweet spot between the really steep slope, which is why that building kind of hugs it. We do go into that slope a little bit, but that's also the reason why we park underneath it, so that we kind of do a cut and fill.
But part of our code that talks about using the steep slopes is that the applicant has to show that there is no other use for his land before we go on a slope greater than 30%.
Right.
So there would be an issue with that. Also, I see on your property line, how did you get ownership of part of a lake? I thought that was Con Edison's property.
I mean, I think the property line's accurate, so it's the survey that we're working on. So
Okay,
I
so-
don't know anything particular about the ownership issue, but I think that's where the property line runs through a portion of that.
Well, part of that lake was filled in with spoils from that blasting. So I'm curious as why that line goes partially through that lake and actually who is the owner of that?
Well, again, that's the survey of the property as we know it, so I believe that's our ownership line, but we can look into that, make sure it's accurate.
And if I'm not mistaken, this is part of the C1, C2 overlay. I don't think you were any M1.
It's, no, it is
It's
part,
part
it's
of M1?
part M1 and part C1. It would require a rezoning. Again, I didn't want to come in here and say, we need this. I
Okay.
really look at this as we have a conversation over concept, and then we could talk about specifics, but the current zoning on the property, the back portion of it is
Back
M1,
portion
and the
is
front
M1.
portion of it is C1, so you would even have to rezone the M1 to C1 to be able to do the overlay over the whole site if you wanted to even just utilize that.
And
Yeah,
because
with a
the
special permit.
situation we run into when we do that, we have to avoid spot zoning. So
Well-
we would have to create a new zone or make every zone be eligible for this type of development,
Correct,
which is somewhat, burdensome.
I could assure you, if we got to the point where you were interested in doing this, that I've been doing this for more than 30 years. I don't lose spot zoning cases. We change zoning all the time with respect to very exciting projects in Westchester, which I'm sure many of you have utilized over the years, and there are ways to do it. I think we'll be
Okay.
very comfortable with that. And that's why, again, I'd like to focus on trying to come to consensus on what we could build, and then we'll come up with the legal structure to make it work, and that it would withstand any potential objection.
thanks.
You mentioned that these are luxury units. What's the typical average rent for a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom?
Per square foot?
Well, it might be a little difficult because
Yeah,
you're
it's-
talking lower Westchester
Yeah.
County. Now you're up in our.
Well, I can tell you that
Well,
you're starting to
we're not
push,
too far from Ossining.
right,
It's a similar
you're
project.
starting to push over $3 a foot in Ossining, more than that. And I can tell you that when we were underwriting that project originally, they were thinking $2.30 a square foot. Again, if you're $2.30 a square foot for 1,000 square foot apartment, which would be a large apartment, would be $2,300 a month roughly. And so to do the math, that kind of thing. So these apartments would be a little bit smaller. Again, the interesting part of the new world that we live in is people don't want quite the same size apartments that they used to. They used to want larger, now they want smaller, and they want bigger amenity spaces because they want to have places to gather and et cetera. It's the new wave of how these buildings are coming about and being designed.
And so these projects, when you do these projects, they're geared towards a more professional, single type person to come in?
You get,
married couple that-
what we call is you get people in transition. Typically you get for the smaller apartments, what we've been seeing is firstly, you see young people. You see, either a single person who's working up in this area, a married couple without children that's doing this. You get, I know it sounds strange, but it's more of a percentage than you think. You get the divorced spouse that's house is in the district and wants to stay nearby and wants to live somewhere and says, oh, I got a nice apartment. I don't have to go live somewhere 30 miles away. And I can actually have a second bedroom for my kids to come visit when I have them once during the week or on the weekends kind of thing. There's a lot of that, more than you'd like to believe. But so that's there. And you also have the empty nesters. You have the people that, may have owned a home in your community for many years, and maybe they're even a snowbird at this point for half the year, but they want to still have their roots down in their community. They don't necessarily want to leave. So having an apartment here and downsizing and cutting the expenses and being able to do that. So you get a lot of seniors as well in these apartments.
So these are all going to be market rate?
These are intended to be market rate unless, of course, your code has, I hadn't
Doesn't.
looked into that, has a requirement of some kind. So the intention is market rate, but we would have of course, we follow all of legal requirements.
And what's so attractive about Buchanan? What brought you here? Like, what is the attraction here that you could sell these units?
You want to come up and talk about it? Tell them why you chose it. I don't want to hear from the lawyer. Let me hear from the people who are putting the investment in.
I can answer that.
Sure. I did work with the developer. I think it's a lot of what Mark had touched on earlier. I mean, I think that there's been shifts in the market. You know, people don't want to live in the cities anymore. People are looking to live, you know, further out. We've been to this market a few times. We think it's beautiful. You know, on the waterfront, it's really amazing. We think the demand is there. I mean, I think that people are just looking to live in these kind of markets. So we think this kind of product doesn't exist out here yet. So we think that, you know, there's no supply, high demand. So we think that those kind of interactions are fantastic for a developer. So just at a high level, we think it's a great spot to be in.
And not to mention a railroad just down the road a piece.
Yeah, the railroad. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
got a
wow.
lot.
There's no question. It is.
The train station's got a lot to do with it.
Absolutely.
Is there any commercial component to this project? No?
There is not. We tried very hard and we looked and we're actually continuing to look for potential other sites where we would be able to maybe hook in and do, you know, but for the moment, we weren't able to design a project that worked for us by putting the commercial in, mostly because you also then have to park the commercial, which has a even heavier parking requirement. It just used up too much land. As you said, we have constraints. We have to respect the lake and the wetlands. We have the steep slopes in the back that we have to go. We're just constrained. So it just wasn't going to work with that on this particular site.
Because you could have some professional offices like lawyers or things like that in
No
there.
more lawyers here, do you?
Wow.
Of course,
Did you just say
we
that?
have plenty of them. There's a market for them too, you know.
Any other questions from the board?
We just, you know, I'd like to thank AMS and thank yourself for the presentation. You know, Buchanan, we are looking, you know, for developers. We appreciate you coming in. Honestly, just on first blush, it looks a little crowded, looks a little big for me. I'd like to see, you know, both sides kind of sharpen our pencils and see what we could do, but appreciate you coming in.
Sure.
So what are you looking for from us going forward?
We generally, I mean, I assume we'll have a conversation with Marcus, is just get a general sense of, are we out of our mind? Is this just not something that you guys are interested in, or you are? But there has, you know, and it's not a negotiation, it's a discussion of what you think would be, you know, would be something that you would be able to support as a board. And we're happy to do that. We're happy to do it within a community meeting, however you want to do it. We'll provide the tools and we'll be available to you to do this, because this is what we do. We go into communities and we come in with new uses, and we sometimes convince, you know, people who hadn't thought of it, and then all of a sudden, you know, it makes sense. And then you look back on it 10 years later and you say, boy, that really made a lot of sense. So that's what we'd like to do. And as I said, I mean, I got to know Marcus living with him for what, 3 years? We built a project on the, represented two developers that built a project on the Sawmill River Parkway off Lawrence Street in the Dobbs Ferry area there that had an iPic movie theater and markets and apartments, and everybody's like, what are you putting on the side of the highway? Are you really? And it worked out beautifully, and I think people are, you know, love that it's there now. It's completely worked out, and there were all the concerns about traffic and all these other things, and it's worked out very well. So you know, that's the kind of thing we like to do, and change isn't easy. People will be concerned, and we have to work through it together, but we're looking forward to partnering with you if you're interested.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Right, so moving on to our workshop. The next is discussion on the Village Code, Chapter 155, entitled Sewers. So the engineer, I hope the board has had a chance to read over some of his comments and suggestions for our sewer code.
Teresa, isn't that George is here too?
Oh, okay.
I don't see him.
Yeah.
So,
George just cleared out.
George, why don't you talk about what the changes
George, yeah,
are?
do you want to
for the
do
public?
a review for us, please? Thank you.
Sure. So we looked at the sewer code, and the reason why we looked at it was because with the upcoming agreement or the IMA that we're working on with the town of Cortland, some issues had come up, and we had to take a closer look at our sewer code to determine what changes needed to be made in there so that we protect the village if they do come in. And it also included some things that probably needed to be done for a few years that we didn't address, such as grease traps. We don't have that section in our code, and this is a good time to put the grease traps and the thing and the items that are needed if we move forward with the town of Cortland and allow them into our sewer system. So starting off, we had to change some of the definitions. One of the items was a brewery. That's come up in the past. The village had a brewery, and that has some adverse impacts on the sewage treatment plant. So we put some wording in there about breweries. And by the way, everything's redlined. So everything that you see that's redlined is what's been changed or modified. What else? Definitions: food service establishment, grease interceptors, grease traps, out of district. We added a definition for out of district due to the possible addition of the town of Cortland. And we updated some of the language to be wastewater instead of sewer. We added licensed plumbers in Westchester and inspections. We added a section about we're up to 155-8 where inspections. This section was added because if there's a violation outside of the sewer district, we want to have some provision to go into another district somehow and do something such as a special tax. We mentioned a special tax assessed in the favor of the village against a property which said improvements are made, such as special bills. And if they don't, if there's a violation, then we can lien the property and get money back from the village. And then we made some other minor changes throughout the.
I don't know which, it's not on my.
Brian, you there?
Okay, I'm muted.
Brian's on his phone.
Okay. Unlawful discharges, we made some modifications to that as well. Again, this was due to the possible adding of the town of Cortland. And some oil, grease discharge, oil water separators. That's pretty much industrial users. So industrial users, that's a classification for pre-treatment. So if someone comes into the system and they are like a BASF and they have chemicals and whatnot, they have to treat their chemicals or their waste prior to discharging into the system. There's a section for that. And we get into sampling, we get into penalties and offenses. Connections to the system. We modified some of the connections to the system to indicate where. So if we connect it, again, this is part of connecting the town of Cortland. There'll be a main in the street. The main will have a service lateral. The service lateral will go to a clean out. The clean out, the village would, or the town would be responsible from the main to the clean out, and from the clean out into the property. That would be the owned by the property owner. And that's pretty much it.
I have a question for you, George, on the 155-17, where you're talking about gasolines, oils, and flammable discharges. There's no inspection criteria. You know, there's a couple of areas in the village where we had approved site plans where they were supposed to submit inspections of their separators to the building department as part of their special permit. And I don't see any of that in here anyplace. So if somebody's going to be, we're going to require them to maintain an oil water separator or a waste separator, there has to be some mechanism to verify that that has taken place. And we should be able to have that in our system to remind our building department that an inspection is due so we can verify that it's in proper operation. I don't see that in here unless I missed it.
It's not in this section. It might be in another section. I'd have to, I'll look into that. And inspection.
But it's tough to, if we write a rule, we have to be able to verify that it's being followed. And there should be a penalty phase along with that if there's a violation.
No, I thought, George, I did think I saw something,
Did
but
you? Oh,
I think I
Yeah,
did.
there's a, so the inspection is not necessarily next to the issue. So 155. like
Okay.
you said, Gasolines and oils. In a later section, we get into inspection. There is an inspection section. And I'm just not seeing it right
because you
now.
had it in there, it says must be regularly maintained and cleared of accumulated debris. The oil shall be removed from the track and collected in a container. And right after that, it should say verification should be submitted on a yearly basis to the building department or something like that. It's always hard to separate enforcement from the actual code, you know?
Yeah, so like I was saying, later in this, the way this is structured, we didn't try to change the whole structure of the code.
Okay.
We just tried to tweak it, sort of saying.
Okay,
But we will cross-check that and make sure that if it's not in this section, the inspection section has what you'd mentioned.
like I said, we should have something that the building department maintains a record and it shall be able to be inspected upon, you know, request or whatever, you know?
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions? And thank you, George, because we were due to get this.
The copy we received in our packet didn't include the change. I think that Stephanie had emailed over to us. I just want to make sure that was incorporated.
Yeah, there was
Yeah,
the change to
definition of
breweries.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
that
have
wasn't
right.
included in the,
Oh, no. I have
not in the
that.
one in our packet. I don't know.
Oh, okay. I
That
have-
may not be the official version.
Yeah. I just saw that.
Separate email.
Okay, but yeah, no, I just saw, I had another paper here that I just saw that had about the breweries and stuff. I was just reading it, as a matter of fact. Thank you.
Yeah, I
All
can
right,
read that.
any other questions for George?
Well, I was just wondering, where are we with the negotiations with the town? Because we only have 30 more days or so, or 35 days? Or,
Town of Portland?
that's correct.
We're gonna do that in executive session.
Well, we're also gonna ask for 30 additional days, so we're in discussions with the state now.
Yeah. And I think what it was too is why the date was the beginning of June, because the applications for the funding is by the end of July. So if we were looking to put in grants, you know, we're gonna have to have that in line before the IMA settled before we can apply for the grants. Okay, all right, thank you. Moving on to discussion on the New York State open meeting law. Cindy, would you like to give us an update on that? I like everyone to participate.
You didn't tell me that.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so I just got this email that said that the state legislator has the open meeting law, and if we want to continue that until June 30th of 2024, that we have to adopt a local law or a resolution in order to use the video conferencing. Doesn't mean we have to use the video conferencing. It depends if you want to keep doing it, whichever we want.
And you have to have a quorum on site.
All right,
it's
so
not
there
total
can't be
video
2
conference.
people here and 3 people on video, on
Correct. You have
Zoom.
to have a quorum present in a public place where, and then you have to announce that place. so that the public can come physically.
So we would have to have 3 people here and
Yeah.
2 people could be at home.
Correct. Right, yep.
Okay.
So if something you want to put a resolution, you put on the agenda, if not. Something happens.
Well, it's a resolution to allow it to take place, correct? Not that it has to.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
that's correct.
So.
So you can just do nothing and let it
Yeah.
go by the wayside.
What is it?
Or we can just.
So it's basically a hybrid.
Still the
That's
hybrid.
correct.
No, it's different because you have to have 3.
3
people
here, yeah, but you're still
That's
hybrid.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, and you still can have,
But the numbers, I mean, I know what you're saying with the numbers.
Yeah, so previously, everybody could be at home.
Yeah.
Now, quorum has to be here,
Correct.
or the library, or the public place.
Didn't we speak about having it at Nick's house last year? Didn't we, wasn't this part of, didn't we
Yeah.
talk about this last
If you
year?
announce that and they're welcome in his house, you can do
Yeah.
that actually under this law.
All right.
all right, we'll be there.
And one other thing, it's not teleconferencing, it's video conferencing, so people
Oh.
should be on video.
Right.
Oh,
They've made a distinction between that and the law,
really? Hmm,
so.
All right,
I mean, you can think about it, whenever you want me to
Alright.
do with it, I'll do.
all right, okay. We'll think about that.
On the previous one, are we gonna set a public hearing for chapter 155? We have to move forward, you know.
Is everyone ready to, are we ready to do that?
Well, we
Has
have the
everyone
draft.
read
too.
it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I
all
have.
right. Do you want
Well,
to-
even
do you wanna
if,
schedule it?
even if we should just move along with it because we're on a time scale, number one. Number two, if there's an issue with more questions or comments from the public, we can always continue the public hearing.
Right.
But we need the 30-day notification so we can take comments. And if everybody's okay with it next month, we can pass that, and that'd be one less hurdle for the intermunicipal agreement for receiving the New York State grant money.
Yeah, because you're
Right.
right, because we're running out of time.
Yeah,
with this
because
IMA.
this
Clock's
is at least
ticking.
30 days, so.
So we would set the public hearing at 30 days, we'd set the public hearing at the May meeting, and then.
Sure, and then we could have a resolution for the June meeting.
possibly.
Well, because
That was
it,
next week, yeah.
I can't
next-
even publish it by then in the paper.
Oh, shoot.
I can't even do a legal notice by then.
all right, so we'll just have we have a resolution for
Schedule.
next week to schedule a public hearing.
Okay.
Right.
You know, we could schedule it and have the 30 days, and we have the public hearing at the June meeting. But we have to have some kind of movement at our next meeting, or else this gets put away for another 60 days,
Yeah,
actually.
no, you're right.
All right,
So-
Cindy, could you put that on for the agenda? Yes. Thank you so much. All right, thank you, Sean.
Bless you.
Okay, so the next discussion on senior director position, I just want to tell you, I have made some calls. I've also contacted the town to see if there's anyone out there that might be able to fit this position. And if you remember, Gabe DeRubo was our director for many years. And Gabe was he fulfilled the civil service requirements. And then after Dave left, the board had to, what the seniors were looking for more were having people come in to do events or speakers, and they were looking for trips. That's what they were looking for. So we did have a senior consultant that did set up trips and, all kinds of things like that. So he has now moved, and the seniors are pretty active here in the village, and they're looking to do different things again, and we do not have a senior director. I don't know if it would help if we advertise. I don't know where we would advertise, but I started with the town of Portland first, to see if there was anybody out there that might be qualified or somebody that could do that. So they'll get back to me on that. I don't know what other thoughts.
I mean, I'm kind of at a loss as to why why we don't advertise positions. I was sworn in here, on the 5th, and I heard an individual who was retiring, he told me that night. And to this day, as far as I understand, that position still has not been advertised. And I know of, I could probably count, how many positions are available to be filled. And then, I just feel like the village should be actively advertising these positions to get as many resumes in that we can, not trying to go out and find, the individuals, but have them come in to us.
Yeah, and that's why we're gonna have a discussion on this, but yes, you're right, because as we talk about the employment thing also, I think I was gonna talk to the board and what their thoughts were about advertising.
Yeah, I think,
So everyone knows, we will have a highway foreman position available. We'll also have a laborer available on the highway, and also we will have a police officer position.
right.
So, and then comes the question, where do we advertise? You know,
Is there a civil service list? Is there simply just Indeed? Is it just,
We've done Indeed, and Cindy can tell you some examples with Indeed, we can advertise in Journal News.
but even like the seasonal help,
Right, we could do Indeed.
What is the requirements for that? Like a week advertisement?
you could do whatever you
I mean,
whatever you want to do.
You can do
Have
anything
to
you want.
post
You
a
could do it a
job for
month.
how long? What does it matter?
Yeah, you could do it a
You
month,
can do anything you want.
do it a week.
New York State has an employment list, and they offer job services for people seeking employment. The list is updated regularly. I forgot the name of it because New York State offered it to all of the Entergy employees. And they provided job counseling, they provided resume writing, they provided interview skills, interview techniques. It's a New York State program. So that's where we should be starting. I wish I had thrown the papers away because I wasn't looking for a job and I already had a resume. But there is a service provided free of charge to every resident.
That's why they do a Google search.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know who you could speak to if you want to,
Is that what it is?
yeah, Department of Labor, sure, yeah. The unemployment office, I'm sure they have, or if you want, you could, Tom Cogden would know, because I know the state task force was also trying to help the laborers and different people, the union people look for jobs, so maybe,
Yeah.
he would have some information.
And
too.
on our website.
Yeah.
would be
Yeah, we
helpful, too.
actually put that.
I know there's
Yeah.
a couple.
We
Yeah.
definitely do that.
Good.
And I believe the Gateway Chamber of Commerce has a list of job opportunities also because they communicate with other businesses who are searching for jobs. So I think Deb Malone might be able to help out.
Okay,
Yeah, no, that would be a good resource too, definitely.
yep.
Good. All right, so we've got some advertising to do, Mr. Marcus.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the next is the discussion of extending the pilot agreement with Pultec as required in the MOU.
Yeah, just to let the board know, we had a 2-year MOU agreement with Pultec, which actually expires. We can actually renew it for 1 more year. So it's just a simple motion that you guys can adopt at the next meeting. Just say we're extending the MOU for another year, which is 1.2 million. We're still in negotiation with a new pilot and infrastructure agreement. I don't think it'll be done in the timing. I don't think it'll be done by the end of this month coming up. So I want to make sure we protect our interest and get at least a 1.2 million. And then hopefully we'll have something approved by the end of May or June. And that might replace that agreement if we can get that done in time. So I know Stephanie's working very hard on that. And we can have a further discussion in the executive session about that as well.
So we're just going to extend the terms and conditions of the previous pilot that was voted on last year that had already included the ability for us to receive $1.2 million through the 2023, 2024. Is that correct?
22, 23.
22, 23.
Correct. And then after that, there's no more pilot, no more extensions. That's what we're trying to get a longer pilot made, and Stephanie can give you an update at that in the executive session.
We don't want to miss our option either.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, we just notified it, but you guys, but you guys.
Well, the option was already written. It was already approved last year.
You have to exercise before May 31st. And you send them a letter saying we would like to do that. Because the other alternative is assessing them. So you'd like to- I think you'd like to exercise that option.
Yes, I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, George, are you still on?
George, we're on the recommendation of the maintenance bond with utility companies, so you update the board on what you want to do with that as well.
Sure. So this past year, or I'm sorry, last year, some issues had occurred over one of the Con Ed utility trenches that was done in previous years. And with a lot of back and forth, we got them to do some corrective work. But our highway permit indicates that we only have a 2-year warranty or 2-year warranty for utility work. And due to that instance, we thought that an improvement could be made where we extend that to 5 years. And the person that or the entity that usually this comes around and affects is Con Ed. They're the offender of this or the one most impacted by it. So we think changing it from 2 years to 5 years would be beneficial to the village.
So George, then if we're going to increase this bond, that means we're going to have to hold the bond for 5 years then, correct?
Correct. Oh, it's actually a warranty. So we don't hold the bond. It's more of a letter. They come back and they fix it.
So
They
then
don't hold the bond.
how do we avoid the cost of enforcement and suing Con Edison if they challenge us, say year 4? We say you have to go dig this up for another $80,000 and they say, no, we don't. How do we enforce this without impacting the taxpayer if we're not going to hold the bond for that long?
We could actually start enforcing a bond because actually I don't think we've ever gotten a bond. It's always been the warranty's actually been just a letter, saying that we will take care of it. And Con Ed usually always comes back. So they're always doing work. So, and they also need to open future road permits. So I haven't come into an instance where they've not done something that's in a code or a rule or some standard that the village has. It's usually when the standard doesn't exist, that's when it's challenged. But when it's there, it's usually not an issue. It's similar to paving from half the road. We used to pave just over the trench, and then we changed that to paving half the road. As soon as we put that in our road standards, it was uncontested. So I think this is the same issue. But if the attorney feels we need some stronger language or a bond, or we have to hold a bond, then the village should consider that.
But if I'm not mistaken, we can't prevent Con Edison from opening up a road for infrastructure improvements that are mandated by the state, correct? What I'm saying is, we don't have a deterrent for them to follow this rule.
If it's an emergency,
Has to be an emergency.
and they can go fix something right away. If it is something that's planned, if they plan for it and they say, well, I want to change out this gas line, like right in front of Village Hall, then you can charge the permit. So that's.
We can charge a permit, but we can't tell them to stop doing it. See, that is not going to be a deterrent. If the state tells them we got to change all these gas lines, they're going to come in and change it. And then in 4 years, when we say, hey, you have to work on this road, they're going to say, well, give me there's nothing we can do to it. I just have a problem passing laws that can't be enforced, that can potentially have a monetary impact. That's all.
George, can we get a 5-year bond?
Yeah,
Because I'm seeing more and more and more that, at Tate Avenue is a prime example. We completely repaved Tate Avenue. And then what makes me even crazier than I already am is like a couple of months later, somebody's digging up the road. They're putting in a gas line, they're putting in a water line, and that's never a couple of places on Tate Avenue after we had the road all nice. And I do realize repairs have to be made, but then it sinks, and then we have to come in and patch it.
Yeah, so we've been trying to coordinate, and actually Con Ed has been reaching out every year for a road improvement schedule. So they reach out to the village and say, what roads are you planning to do in the next 5 years? We look at the gas mains that are in those roads and try to prevent that from happening. So there's been more of a coordinated effort in the last few years to try to prevent that. But you're right, if come along and improve a road and gas main starts to leak, there's not much we can do about it, other than have our standards and our rules in place, that we can tell them what to do. And as I said before, I haven't run into where they contest something that's in the standard. It's when it's not there that it's an issue.
Okay.
And who's the one, if you're saying we don't have a bond, but who is the one that comes and inspects and says that the bond should be released? And now I'm finding out we don't have a bond, but
So we usually document it in the road opening permit. So the road opening permit is your start and your stop of when your warranty begins and ends. So you open a road opening permit and you close a permit. And once you close it, the date you close it is the date that your warranty starts. So the permit says that we're supposed to get a bond, but like I said, I've never seen a bond in the past.
who like inspects this? Like,
Yeah, if we don't inspect the project, how do we stop one? How do we expect to get a warranty?
So they have their own inspectors on site when they do work. And over the past year, the village is now taking out a road opening permit and a fee. So now we can be out there as well inspecting. And if we see something, we say something. So
yeah, I'm just saying like a year later, after the permit's closed, that's when we're noticing the sinking and all that other stuff. So, and I always was told that we had a bond, that we had some backbone with a bond, that we could go after them if there was a problem with the road.
Well, we have that with individual developers.
Right.
If somebody
yeah.
came in and built the building,
Yes.
we return it in certain portions to forward the project, but we don't get that from the utilities.
That's right.
Yeah, that's just for water sewer hookup, right? Is that, I mean,
Well, yeah,
utility hookup?
Utility is a private developer, yes.
well, we've had bonds for curbing, we've had bonds for drainage. We've had different kinds of bonds.
It seems like we don't inspect our standards. So if they're inspecting our standards, I don't know how we can expect the road to get done to our standards.
You can't, that's what I mean. It's hard to enforce something when there's no mechanism there.
No, there's nobody checking them.
So
Yeah, any suggestions?
we do collect a fee now so that we can inspect them. We didn't do that in the past. So now we do charge a fee. So now we can go out there and inspect what they do. In addition to their own inspectors. So.
But my concern is a year down the road when it's falling apart.
That's why he's doing the
warranty.
5-year warranty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm all for that.
It makes it worse on us if we go out and inspect it and say it's okay. Con Ed says it's okay. And then 4 years later, we say, well, it's not okay. Pay us to fix it. It's like, what do you mean? You told us it was good. You inspected it. We inspected it. There has to be some other issue.
That's common. Even though anybody inspects it, there's unforeseen conditions that can cause something to happen. So inspection is not a guarantee that something will work. It's just another level of oversight and quality control, but it's not a guarantee. So even on state highway projects where they have 5, 6, 7 inspectors watching over bridges and roads, it's not a guarantee. They still have to provide a warranty of the product. So
Still holds them accountable though.
Yeah.
it still holds the contractor accountable and, or in this case, the utility company accountable. So.
And do something, yes, definitely. Okay. All right, any other questions for George? Let's make that happen. All right, I think that's it. Thank you, George. I don't think there's anything else here.
Unless you want to keep them for executive session for the IMA discussion.
All
Up to
right.
you.
Can you hang on until we get into exec?
Absolutely.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, the next is a discussion on accessory apartments. Sean, I know that's, you wanted to have a talk on that.
Yeah, for the new members, over the summer, we had a discussion about enforcement for the inspections, what the inspection criteria was. We also had comments a year or so ago from some zoning board members of the interpretation of the legislative intent. And we had kicked around how to inspect it or what the intent is and stuff, but we never really formalized it. And now that the inspections have been going forward, some of the things that I had wanted to change in the summer to safeguard some of the residents were never changed and are being enforced now. So I had given you guys a memo. I had just written it up, so I'm sorry you didn't have a chance to read it, but we can go over a couple of things. And if you have some questions on it, I can clarify it and maybe we can amend the code and discuss it going forward. So in the legislative intent, one of the comments that were made a year or two ago, actually when I was on the planning board, closer to 3 years ago, was how do we determine income? Because the legislative intent talks about limited income for low and moderate income, and there's really no test for that. So I believe the legislative intent a long time ago was so that when people could have their mother's daughter, whatever, we used to call them mother daughters and stuff, to stay within the village. So my suggestion is to remove the income requirements from the legislative intent, because there again, there's no test and it's arbitrary. You know, unless the board wants to make it the legislative intent 80% of the mean, or 60% of the mean, or 120% of the mean of the county income, like they do for subsidized housing. I don't think that that's what was the intent of this part of the clause. So I'd like to see that removed.
I don't even know legally if we could even require for people to submit their income. You know.
Yeah.
No, and there again, it's not enforceable. It's open to interpretation. You know, we might come to a conclusion that that's the way it should be, but the next group of people here, if somebody on the planning board or zoning board might have a different interpretation. So we should get rid of the ambiguity and just go forward with it. In B4, part of the special permit is it said that all structures on the property need to be inspected and to be brought up to code. And I had mentioned it over the summer also, that I thought it was not fair that the entire property is being inspected to be brought up to today's code when all of the residents in the village or all property owners don't have to. So I thought you were singling out somebody who was attempting to help in the housing that had an accessory apartment to bring their entire structure up. And that could be interpreted to and change every year. So what I had wanted to do was to change the wording to say an accessory apartment shall be permitted only when the apartment is maintained in a reasonable state of repair and modernization, and where the accessory apartment and any new construction undertaken for the accessory apartment shall be in compliance with Chapter 67. So all the other wording can stay the same, but I wanted it to reflect that the accessory apartment and the construction thereof is what has to be maintained and maintained up to code. I don't think it's fair that somebody who has extra 2 or 3 bathrooms has to modify their bathroom in their primary structure just because they have a special permit. And if everybody has to do that just for the accessory apartment special permit, every resident should have to do it. And that opens up a can of worms. So I think everybody's primary residence should be treated the same. If you want a special permit, that is the part that should be changed. 6A, let's see, 6A. 6A, I wanted to add in there, planning board shall include but not limited to consideration of the following circumstances. So it says in making its determination on a special permit, the planning board shall include but not limit to consideration of the following circumstances. Because if you read this section, it just says certain limiting things shall be considered. There could be ancillary factors that nobody has postulated before that might be required. So I hate limiting inspection criteria. I hate limiting things because something might become necessary in the future and we would have to change the code. So I just wanted to say include but not limited to those following things, where it says proposed accessory apartment, including exterior appearance of the building, single family dwelling, all of those things still should remain.
Okay, so 6A would,
6A, where it says planning board shall,
Okay.
I wanted to insert the planning board shall include but not limit consideration to the following circumstances. And those following circumstances are listed, and I don't think they have to be changed. I just don't want to limit, because one piece of property might have different considerations than another piece of property based on its location. And that couldn't be taken into consideration because the code doesn't allow it. One thing that I had in there that I didn't add that I had discussed over the summer. Where was it? Was D1 Bravo. Okay, it's not on your list right now. That's part of the 60 to 90 days change of ownership. We had discussed over the summer where it says when you change the ownership of a property, you have to reapply to the planning board. If you don't reapply or if you're denied, you have 60 to 90 days to remove your tenant. It's virtually impossible to remove a tenant in 60 to 90 days, 120 or even 180 days. And I had felt at the time, and I feel at the time now, that this type of limiting condition will not only prevent people from being able to transfer their house. If somebody was to die, you'd have to basically kick the tenant out, or you wouldn't be able to transfer the property. I don't think that that's a reasonable requirement. I believe that that entire section should be changed to say, in the event of a change of ownership, the new owner and applicant shall adhere to all of the terms and conditions of the special permit issued to the property. So it'll still be under the same inspection criteria. If it's a 1-year inspection criteria, the property will just be maintained for the next couple of months. I just find it hard to have that rule in there because it can't be enforced. You're not kicking a tenant out. And if you kick it, if the tenant doesn't leave in that 90 days, now the owner is in violation. Now, what are you going to do? Take away a CO, fine them? You know, it's a rule that's very difficult to enforce.
So are you saying within the 90-day, I'm just trying to clarify to my head. So are you saying the 90 days to eliminate the 90-day after this?
I want to eliminate that time frame, and I would like that property to be able to be transferred with the same terms and conditions as it was occupied during the transfer. So the special permit would carry with the property, and the owner would have to follow all of the rules that the previous owner had followed. You know, or we could say he has to come to the to the building department to initiate the paperwork, to verify like it was a continuing inspection, but forcing somebody to come to the planning board, which would be a 60 to 90-day process anyway, before he can even be voted on. It's very arduous. It's almost impossible for the owner to follow the rule. And that would, when you create a rule that can't be followed, you create a rule that's going to be violated and have to be chased. So we could change it any way you want. If the intent is, we have to know when it's transferred, or because we're always going to be in that inspection criteria anyway.
So, yeah, because this, I think this code, this has been in effect, since 1989?
Yeah, but now people are having to, because the inspectors are following the law, which they're supposed to, they're asking, after they've done the safety inspections and after they've said, yeah, everything's okay, now anybody who has transferred their ownership since the original permit, they're being asked to file another request in front of the planning board as if it was an initial condition. Now, if it gets denied, now you have to kick the tenants out again, which you're not going to be able to do. And
yes and no.
well, there again, you're putting the onus just because the owner of the property died and the son now has it. Now his ability to maintain that property is going to be limited because now he can't have the tenants. So now not only does he lose the tenants, he has to modify his structure to prevent the apartment from being occupied. And that's a little arduous.
But if the new owner says, they don't want to go through the special permit process, or they just, refuse to file, and the special permit expires. Now those tenants are now, that
So they have to go, and that's in another
compliance.
section of the code.
Okay, so then what happens?
So the owner is allowed, as per our code right now, to either renew the permit or notify the building department that the special permit will not be continued anymore. And then that's up to the owner to kick them out. I just don't want the village to force somebody to be kicked out. If the owner wants to kick somebody out on their own and make it a one-family house, that's fine. They have that option in several places in the code.
Yeah, we want to make sure for safety, health and safety reasons that these accessory apartments are safe.
Oh, no, absolutely. And the inspection
Yeah.
criteria will stay the same. And actually, I've proposed an increased inspection criteria for certain things. But I just have a problem with kicking somebody out because, it might not meet the whim or whatever of what people would be asking for.
And
I don't know how to
think
put it.
I think when people buy, because it's a really huge benefit to have an accessory apartment in somebody's home. And I think the original intent, and I wasn't on the board in 1989, but I think the original intent was to help some of the homeowners to be able, and this is 1989, to be able to afford to live here by having that accessory apartment, or perhaps a family member would live in, and there could be some income there also. So I don't know, and Buchanan, I will tell you, we are one of the higher municipalities within the county that has accessory apartments. And, fortunately, whoever wrote this back in 1989, this has been really working well for the village, the accessory apartments. It's a controlled, it's basically an apartment, but it's controlled better than an apartment. It has to be owner occupied. I'm just giving some background. So the owner has to occupy it. There are inspections that are required. There are fees that are required. What we're seeing in the village, it's not the accessory apartments that are a problem. What we're seeing when there is a problem is the absentee landlord. And that creates a whole nother thing, but the building inspectors have been pretty in tune to that. So I thank them for that. But yeah, this is like, I know you're going over this with us tonight, Sean, and I wouldn't be able to give you an answer like tonight.
No, I understand. I just wanted to
Yeah.
introduce it and,
Okay.
there's no way that we would be able to write anything up to even be ready for the next 2 or 3 months. But I would like the board to look at these things because there are a lot more things that we had on there if you want to go over it at a different time, but we can. But I would like a moratorium to be placed on new applications. The inspections can be fine. Everybody has to go in and do inspections for safety. But I don't know if we should be asking the property owners to come and file new permits in front of the planning board if the board wants to entertain changing the code.
Is there anyone that's there
Yes.
now that's
Yes,
going to?
there's-
Oh.
Hey, Peter's on. Peter, how many potential applications are on there on the sale that we're holding right now?
Pretty much one at this point.
Oh, just one? I thought there was a couple.
We approved one before all this began, and now there's just one, and his paperwork was ready to go until the last meeting. So we put him on hold for the moment.
Well, I have one question, Sean. So you're asking that all of B be eliminated?
No, not all of D. No. I want to change. D1 and D2. I want D2 to read as the initial permit shall be valid for a period of a year, at which time the building department shall notify the applicant of the expiration of the original special permit, and that the application for an extension from the building department is required. Subsequent thereto, the special permit shall be valid for a period not to exceed 3 years. The exact term be determined by the building department. At the end of such period, the building department shall require the owner applicant to renew the permit, or the said owner shall notify the building inspector that his intent to discontinue the permit in accordance with the applicable time periods established. And I wanted to add in there, reissuance of the special permit shall be based on but not limited to the following criteria, which is not currently in the code. 2 or more verified complaints of violation of the original terms of the special permit, primary structure no longer owner occupied, unauthorized modification to accessory apartment, no more than 1 bedroom, or more than 1 bedroom, I should say. Accessory apartment is in a state of disrepair. Any other factor deemed warranted by the building inspector. And there's also wanted to put in there the ability for the applicant to appeal the decision of the building department. So I wanted to add another paragraph. It says that the building inspector has determined that the special permit for the accessory apartment should not be reviewed. The owner applicant may appeal the decision of the building inspector to the planning board for final determination. Currently, the planning board has that final determination. So the building inspector would be the one who would be able, or the building department, to go out and inspect it. They would be the ones that would be receiving the complaints from neighbors. They would be the ones that would be the focal point. So I want them to get the first crack at it because they're the ones that are going to be in enforcement. And if they, since they're not the appointed, well, they are the appointed officials, but they're not the permitting authority. If that permit is denied, the planning board can go through the entire process to see if the denial was valid. And they would have the final granting authority as they currently do.
So I just got a question, Sean. I just want to make sure for the public information as well. Right now, if I remember correctly, somebody comes in and has to go to a planning board first. The planning board then sets the approval for the first year, which is good for 1 year. And then they got to come back after the first year and get a 1, 2, or 3 year extension. I just want to make sure. So are you saying?
Well, the planning board
will be
doesn't set,
removed?
the planning board does not set the 1, 2, or 3 year reinspection. It's the, if I'm not
No, it's the
mistaken.
planning board. I thought it was the planning board. I'll have to- Oh, Peter, did you say something?
Planning board shall request renewal of the permit subsequent thereto. The special permit shall be valid for a period not to exceed 3 years. The exact term determined by the planning board upon reissuance of the permit. So I want to remove that and give it to the building inspector to determine the frequency.
That's what I wanted to make sure.
Because like I said, he would be the one that knows that, hey, this looks like somebody already had a stove in there. He took it out when I came in to do the reinspection. We used to do a lot of site plan visits when I was on a planning board for issues and continuations of special permits. I don't know what the frequency is, but I always felt that was a little intrusive on somebody to have 5, 6 people walking through their houses, you know? So I didn't like doing it. We did it because that's what we had to do.
Right.
But I think that the building inspector should be the one who's doing that.
Okay, so I just want to make sure. So are you taking the planning board out of the initial process? and
No, not the
renewal
initial process. The planning board has to be the one that issues the initial permit.
Gotcha.
It's the renewal permit that I wanted to give to the building inspector
Okay.
because they're the professionals.
So the first year, so the planning board will issue a special permit for
Yes.
1 year.
Yes,
And then after that, they never have to come back to the planning. board.
unless there's a denial
There's an
by
issue.
the
Okay.
building inspector,
That's what I wanted to understand. Thank
you know, because it allows continuity. Planning board members change all the time, you know, and you're not gonna know every 3 years what the place was like before. If the building inspector gets the complaints, they can go in and ask at any time to look at it. They can go in for reapprovals. They could say, you know, like I said, this doesn't look like it was right before. Let's not make it 3 years. Let's make it 2 years. You know what I mean?
Okay, that's all.
But there again, you know, I'm open to suggestions. I just wanted to get the ball rolling because I know I kicked it around last year for a while. I thought it was the perceived problem was remedied and nothing ever changed. So I wanted to recodify it to make it simpler. I would always like to have rules and regulations that are easy to follow because people won't violate them. When you make something that's hard to follow or it's open to interpretation, where somebody could be in the hazard, could potentially lose their ability to generate income, they'll do everything they can to skirt the law. And we've seen in the past where it's taken us 10 or 15 years to get a handle on 20 or 30 pieces of property. So we should make it easier for people to follow it and also make it easier for inspection and for, you know, to maintain safety within the village. So I'm open to change, you know, if you guys don't agree with it, we can change it around any way you want. I just think we should be relooking at it. That's all.
So with the inspections after the 1 year, when it goes to the planning board and now it goes to the building inspectors, so
They inspect every year.
they inspect every year.
Yeah.
Okay, that
Unless
was,
there's a complaint and they can go back
Okay.
again anytime.
that was,
See,
so that
just
was
the
up
building
the inspection.
It's up to
more
them.
than the-
It's up to them if they want to do it for 3 years, 2 years, and 1 year.
Okay. The building inspector.
The
at
building
that point.
inspector, yeah.
Okay.
And that'd be based on the factors that I set forth, you know? And we had envisioned that a long time ago when we started getting into computers. We had wanted calendars to pop up on the building inspector's page, say, hey, this guy's due in 6 months. You know, it's been 3 years on June 5th. Let's get him in here on May and you get a reinspection. But that never happened. It all stayed paper and it was almost impossible to
That's
trace,
correct.
you know? So this type of inspection should come up as a notification on a piece of property, just like a tax comes up or anything comes up. And also, it should be dovetailed into the inspections we were talking about with the sewers, with the grease traps, with the oil separators. All of these things should be pop-ups so that you don't get lost. You know, all of these things have been created to safeguard the public and to help the property owners be aware. Once we leave it on the property owners, everybody was in violation. So you have to know there's a problem when every single person with a special permit turns up in violation. The code or the inspection criteria was not set correctly. So that's something I'm trying to remedy.
Okay, and then, you know what, we have a new program coming for the building inspector with this. You know, we remember we bonded that for the police and
Correct.
now would this be something that we could,
Now,
and
yeah.
Peter's shaking his head, yes.
Yes.
So that would be something that could be incorporated, that would help the building department to stay on top of that.
And the public will have access to it. as
Yeah,
well.
I'm sure if we sent out a notice 6 months before the inspection or 4 months or 3 months before the inspection, we wouldn't have everybody in violation. You know, people say, hey, you know, building department's in charge of that. Why do I have to go here, you know?
All right, Peter, I know you wanna say something?
I have a few points I'd like to bring
Sure,
up.
thank you.
One, the word reinspection, that's an annual requirement by New York State. It's the renewal process of the 1 or 2 or 3 year scenario. Now, if we decide the building department that they're good for 3 years on the renewal process, they still have to go back before the planning board, correct?
No,
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 that
the
would,
recommendation is not be eliminated.
You're eliminating that, but we still, the annual requirement is, it's an inspection annually. So there's no
Correct.
renewal process. It's on the building department to bring up an issue
Yeah.
if we.
yeah, and if you have, yeah, and in this code, I have put in criteria that you could use, and you basically use any criteria to say, hey, this no longer meets the original intent or the legislative intent of your permit. I'm not going to renew your permit. You have the
understand.
ability to come to the planning board and use the old process as a fallback. You know, that's, you know, and there again, like I said, you guys are the experts. You guys will be the ones that will be receiving the complaints. The planning board member doesn't know that, you know, that there's complaints. You guys have the files, you have the prints, you have everything. So you guys could say yes or no. If you don't want to do it, we could still change the code and you could deny everybody and it could come back to the planning board. So you have the mechanisms available to enforce the law on this fallback.
I just want to make sure that I'm clear that they technically do not have to come before the planning board again based on our interpretation of what's happening in their original permit, unless we have an issue. So
That's
there's no
correct.
1 or 3 year renewal. I just want to understand. And the other
That's,
earlier, based on residents having an issue with us coming into the accessory apartment, New York State requires that the residence has a safety compliance because it has an accessory apartment. The 1 or 2 people that had an issue, they had a common hallway connecting 2 separate living areas, and those doors entering into those parts of the residences had to have a fire rating. That was it. Otherwise, we're primarily looking for carbon and smoke detectors. That's it. We're not asking them to update their existing residence that's not the accessory apartment to 2020 code. We're just trying to keep the safety compliance of carbon and smoke detectors for life safety and fire separation between living areas. Those are the 2 primary items that we're actually looking for. We're not asking the residents to update their house to 2020 code. I just want to make that clear because it sounds yeah.
We had this discussion last year also.
Yep.
And when you say you go into the residence to do an inspection for safety, there are more things that have been involved in safety since some of these accessory apartments have been instituted, like window egress, you know, all kinds of things have been changed. You guys have determined that the fire doors and the smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors will limit your inspection criteria. However, New York State requires more, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
There are certain other things, but
Yes,
again,
there are certain other things that it's based on your determination
and we're
that
trying to be
it's not
fair.
required to be enforced.
We're trying to be fair and reasonable to the residents.
I understand that, but it still leaves things open to interpretation. And it's always best to codify something so that it's not up to interpretation.
I just want to say something, as a building inspector, if they go into a house to see a smoke detector and they see something that's improper, they have to act to it. They can't close their eyes and walk away from it. I'm just saying that they see something. So that's something to protect the village from a lawsuit and somebody getting hurt. So I understand what you're saying. We don't want to bring it to the code, and I think Brian and Peter are doing a good job doing that. But if they do see something, just like a police officer, they see something, they have to react to it. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that.
You know, I understand the issue you're talking about, and it's about the safety of the residents. It's about the safety of the renters. You know, we don't want anyone getting hurt, and like Marcus said, if the building inspector sees something, he can't walk away from it and turn his head on it, because God forbid there's a fire and somebody gets hurt. The village is in hot soup.
When he got to testify in court, he can't say, I was told not
Yeah,
to
no.
follow the code.
No, oh, no.
That's the only
And we're not, Peter, we're not asking you not to follow the code.
No, I understand.
Let's make that clear.
Nope, very clear.
I
Thank you.
I just like all the residents to be treated the same,
Oh, absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely.
And just
Which
because
we
somebody
can't-
has chosen to have an accessory apartment, their primary residence shouldn't have to be brought up to code, because everybody's primary residence don't have to. So you're singling people out who have a special permit.
Mm.
And that's,
Voluntarily, you actually for accessory unit. And if you sell your house, you have to do a reinspection of your house right now.
only the last couple of years.
How, just a couple, what is
That law wasn't around 10, 15 years ago.
Which law, the reinspection?
Yes,
But it's the law now, so.
it's a law of the village because the village adopted it.
Correct,
It's not the law in New York State.
correct.
Okay.
But as soon as the building inspector enters your house
Mhm.
and they see something, you have to react to it. That's what I'm saying. And if you don't want an accessory unit, then you don't get an inspection until you say you have. It's your choice.
Yes, it is. That's what the elected officials will determine.
But we don't
I
want to
have one-
handcuff Peter, and that's
No.
his job.
I have one more point that I'd like to bring up that Mr. Murray was speaking of when an ownership transfers over and they have the option to keep or not keep the accessory apartment. They need to completely remove one of the items, the complete entire kitchen or the complete entire bathroom. They cannot have the ability to have it and not have the special permit. So one of those items in its entirety needs to be removed from the accessory apartment if they choose not to keep it. Because technically it's still an apartment just because they don't want the special permit. I just want to make that clear,
Okay, we could add that in there. It's not a problem.
right? I just want to, we're
Absolutely.
on the same
Sure.
page. That's all.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Had the conversation. All right.
Okay.
And then, you know, we'll come back to this. I want the board to look this over, and then we can.
Sure. Well, like I said, I'm open to any kind of amendments that you guys want. I just think we got to move the process forward because it's been discussed for a long time. It hadn't been enforced for many years. You know, Barbara had tried to enforce it. She had limited success. The last building inspector had even less limited success. And unfortunately, there's some issues that are still going on based on the approvals of a previous inspector. So when you have a pendulum swing one way, now you have it swing the other way.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with a law that was written 40 years ago, it's a little difficult. 30 years ago.
And before we close this matter, there is one applicant that's holding, so at this point Peter can tell him it's an abeyance at this point, and that person doesn't have to come to the planning board until you make a decision. I want to make sure we get that clarified.
So
Well,
that's-
if that's what you guys want,
That's
that's
what I wanna
fine.
make sure.
You know,
Okay.
if we're gonna change that section, if you guys don't want to change that section, you can keep going forward. You know, it's up to you guys. You know, we're not looking for a vote on it right now, but if you think that would be amended or any amendment to this law would impact any future accessory apartments, we could have a moratorium on new applications or a moratorium on reapplications, however you guys want to do it.
I'm not sure if I'm ready to, I don't know.
So Peter, I
Is the
want
board
to make sure you got
interested?
one applicant has the application ready to go. Is there anybody else that's pending that's sold, who actually purchased it, that has to come back in front of the planning board?
No one's come forward at this time. Only the one.
And they would be coming, the one that's pending would be coming to the May planning board meeting?
They were prepared to come to the meeting prior, but we postponed that to discuss this. Paperwork process, application process, I'm sorry.
They bought the house. So according to their current code, if they buy a house, they gotta come back to the planning board.
Yeah, they bought the house a couple of years ago. They had their re-inspections, which were satisfactory. Now they've been asked to come to the planning board to continue the re-inspected property already, which I thought was a little arduous.
So when they come back to the planning board so when they come back to the planning board, they bought the house 2 years
weren't told
ago, they come back to the planning board.
No.
As at that point, they're paying a fee, another application fee? Would the-
Yeah,
the new
they
person
well,
would be
they
paying
paid the fee for the
$300?
They paid the fee for the re-inspection. They
Okay.
had the inspection last
Okay.
year, or 8 months ago or 10 months ago. Then they didn't receive any response after the inspection. Then they were told that they have to file for a new permit and come to the planning board and start the process all over again, which I thought that was a little tough, you know?
Are we singling out somebody here like, or is this for everybody? Like,
This is gonna be I would like this for
I
everybody.
mean, I think it should be for everybody. It seems like right now, we're singling somebody out, and maybe we should discuss that in executive or something. Or do something to move forward in this process, because you guys are saying the same things over and over again.
Yeah,
And it's time to move on.
all right.
Okay. So we won't do the moratorium, I guess, at this point.
That's the question.
That's the question. I don't know.
So Peter can tell that person to
Okay.
go to the planning board. That's
Would you
what we're
guys like to
saying.
do a moratorium until we finish this and discuss
I'm
this?
not gonna do that at a workshop anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to like get ready for next May, for the May meeting next Tuesday, if we could. So we're discussing it now. So let's, will we make a decision at the May meeting to take a vote on that? Is that how that would work, or is that a public hearing? Yeah. All right, so we can't do anything right now anyhow, but you know,
I mean, we'll put it on, if you wanna put it on, we'll put it on, and then I'll get back to you.
okay, all right.
But in
We
the
can discuss
meantime,
it
would this
further.
applicant,
We'll put it on.
Yeah, so we tell them to come.
should the applicant come to the May?
Well,
planning
let's
board
wait
meeting?
till next Tuesday,
All right.
May's meeting, and then
Okay.
we'll have a
Okay,
consen-
Peter, you
some
got
type
that?
of a consensus.
Yes, thank you.
It's not till what, the third Thursday of May anyhow, so our meeting is next Tuesday, the beginning of May.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because I'd like to, go through this more. Yes, Nick?
Can I just make one comment on that?
Sure.
Should I come up?
Sure.
Just private resident Nick Zachary. Just to keep perspective on that, for the average person that lives on a street in this village of one-family homes, having a few people around them add apartments or have apartments impacts their lives and their lifestyles more than 100 units behind the hardware store. I just want, just kind of keep perspective there. You, by keeping, we were talking about maybe too many units over there. I know these seem unrelated, but ultimately we're talking about quality of life in the village. And I think I would rather have 100 units over there on 9A than have 3 of my neighbors add accessory apartments in terms of how it would affect me and the noise and cars and so forth. While we should allow people to have accessory apartments the way we've currently done it, I don't think that it should, I'm not sure if I understood that right, but I don't think it should transfer automatically with a new owner. I think you want to allow them, but you don't want to make it that easy so that people, if they want it, have to do something to get it. That's my feeling. Thanks.
In a transfer, and you've had experience, Sean, what is really required other than filling out an application and submitting before
Same
the
thing, to
planning board?
reapply for the.
The
accessory
apartment is
apartment.
existing.
Yeah. Maybe you could streamline that process.
But
But I think that.
how much more is it than one meeting and one
I'm
fee?
not really sure. I think it takes a few.
What we have done in the past is when a potential buyer was going to purchase an accessory apartment, the planner, the person who was going to buy it came to the planning board and said, what do you want? And we would say, go back to the property owner, get a letter saying you're acting as my agent. And then they explore whether you think you would do the application. And then half the time, the building inspector just signed it off because the planning board didn't have an issue with it.
So it's not too hard.
No, but if somebody's gonna lose the ability of that apartment by that sale, you might not have that sale and nobody's gonna be able to sell their house.
I don't think they're gonna lose a sale based on.
Okay.
I don't,
Especially these days.
Okay.
not what the way the market is.
Okay, thanks, Nick. All right, so the only other thing I wanted to mention, I know you brought it up last week. It was the sale of the property on 9. The village property that we had.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you had mentioned that. Yeah, corner of Blakely and 9A. What's it like, almost an acre?
Yeah.
A little shy of an acre, or something like that. So I just, I know you had mentioned it, Sean, and I've been thinking about it, and something, I don't know if the board is interested in hiring a realtor. I don't know what your thoughts were for that. to
Well,
sell it to a
we've
developer.
been trying to sell it for a long time. It
Yeah.
originally was appraised at $300,000 back in 2009, I think it was. The previous administrator said we'll put a price tag of $450,000 on it to hopefully get some money to close the budget gaps that we had back then, and nothing ever came to fruition. So it would be my suggestion that we engage a realtor. We don't put them under contract. We set a contract with them for a percentage of the sale and have them do the legwork. That property is not doing anybody any good sitting there. We didn't purchase it. We got it through a tax liens from 2 houses that were previously on there back in the 70s or 80s. And it could only be a benefit to get somebody to redevelop it. We're not in the business of developing property, so.
No, no. You're
Where's the property again? Where is it?
Corner of Blakely and
Across
Route
from the
9A.
deli.
Oh, okay.
You'll see that there's a little driveway that goes up in there. There used to be 2 houses there.
Yeah, they burnt down. if I remember.
There's a Verizon
One
building
burnt
or
down.
something right on the corner.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about now.
All right. So we will direct Marcus to,
Okay, real estate agency. What kind of fee they can
Yeah,
charge and
sure.
stuff like that. No problem.
all right, good, thanks. What else? Does the board have anything else? I think we've covered everything.
And in executive session, I'd like to discuss the pay scales that we had talked about with one of our employees. Remember last month, there was a request for an increase in pay for one of our employees.
Mhm.
I don't think we ever came to a conclusion.
Okay. Just want to bring in one of the items that's on the board meeting is Stephanie wrote up a thing regarding the change in the village code regarding the pilots, same thing. So that's on the agenda too. She's sending everybody a memo. Want to make sure that's something we got to discuss. Remember the changes of the section 181, that section of the code for the pilot? So I just want to make sure that's something besides the extension to the pilot, you have to agree to have a budget. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, does anybody have any comments from the audience before we go into executive session?
Want me to give a brief thing on the LWRP?
Are you going to be coming to this Tuesday night's meeting here?
I should be able to do that.
Because I would like to do a presentation on Tuesday night's meeting. But I know we've advertised it, the LWRP, and you're right, I think it's,
Because there's the LWRP meeting next Thursday.
Right.
At the town hall. It's a public meeting, info meeting. So.
well, come up to the mic for a minute, sure, yeah. Just to advertise that, to get people to
Yeah.
come to that.
Yeah,
Thank
so, and for Steve and Dan and the rest of you as well, but especially them. The LWRP has been going on for 2 years. Stands for Local Waterfront Revitalization Plan. It's a state program. The state gives out grants to municipalities to basically come up with a plan for their waterfronts. It's not just the waterfront. Our waterfront is considered from the river to Washington Avenue. It's basically streets that are close to the water, are impacted by the water. So it's things like access to the park and to the riverfront, sidewalks come into play, and it's basically like a mini master plan. And like a master plan, it's not legally binding, but it gives some guidance. It has to kind of work with our code, and our code has to kind of work with that. And once in place, it sort of states what, a vision is for the waterfront, and it's useful for getting grant money, like a master plan. That's one of the purposes of it. Once in place, you use that to say, because our master plan suggests that we do this, we're looking for grant money to whatever, improve this park or build this building or improve recreation. So for 2 years, it's been going on for almost 2.5 years. It was supposed to be a 1.5-year process, but COVID did it again. This is the final draft, and it's very light
Yeah, it
reading.
looks like it.
It
For people
includes all the
for people that
municipalities.
have tons of time on their hands. And the public info session where the public will be able to comment will be next Thursday, May 5th at the town hall at 7 or 7. I think I wrote it down. I didn't write down the time. I forget if it's 7 or 7. I think it's from 7 to 8:30 at the town hall next Thursday, the 5th. We've already done public sentiment surveys, and the surveys focused on different areas for Plank, town of Cortland Parks. There was one section on the village of Buchanan. The general thing coming out of those of the public sentiment surveys is people really want to see open space and river access, whether they're kayakers, boaters, fishermen, or just people that like to walk by the river. That was open space was big. And the village has to balance that with the need for commercial and tax income. So if you go to the village, on the village website, there's a link to the LWRP site.
Yeah.
And you can actually see all the survey results on there. If anybody wants to borrow this, I'd like to have it for next week. If anybody wants to borrow this until, I'd like it back maybe next Monday, so I could have it to look at for a couple of days before. Monday or Tuesday would be great if somebody wants to take it till then.
Does that
Going
include
once,
any of the
going
comments? Does that include any of the comments that we had submitted?
If you get
for-
another one, you could use it for exercise.
When the original draft came out, the board members were asked
Yes,
to review and
and-
modify.
Yeah, I don't know if you're free that Thursday, but that, your
Well,
comments.
I gave you all the
One of your
comments.
comments was
I gave
that there's a consistency law, and you asked what that meant. And I don't know if we ever discussed that.
I gave a whole ton of comments on
Yeah, there
there,
were a
like
few.
who's gonna be
A
in
couple
charge
of
of the
them were
water.
just interpretations, and really just a matter of when you realize what they're saying, it would answer your question. I could go over that with you. I don't have that with me right now.
My question
But-
is, did you cull all of the comments from the board members?
You were the only
But
one that gave in comments.
Oh, what a
Yeah.
surprise.
So one of your main questions was, what is the consistency law?
I had 3 pages of comments, Nick.
I only had, oh yeah,
You must-
okay, I have them. You had 3 pages of printed out from the LWRP.
It had
and
all
you
different
wrote
things
lines.
on
A
all.
couple of the things I wasn't clear what you were trying to say. But
Okay.
anyway, one of your questions was, what's the consistency law? There's a form for this law in the back, and the village has to adopt this law. And it's basically there are 44 policies that the state has, and they want you to make sure that nothing in your zoning conflicts with their policies. And their policies have to do with conservation and environment. They have to do with developing deep water docks. Some of them don't apply to us, but we just have to review them. And that is in here. And in order to adopt the LWRP, we also have to pass that consistency law, which is, they give us the model form in the back, in the appendix of this. So nobody wants it?
I have the Buchanan section. That's the important one.
Yeah,
for
you
me.
can go on.
That's
You can go
my
on the
focus
website.
here.
All right.
All right, thanks, Nick.
But
Appreciate it.
that will be next Thursday, and I'll go. And if you wanted to go, you can. If you wanted to ask me questions before I go, you can do that too.
All right, thank you, and thank you for being part of that program and continuing with that. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Nick. Okay, I just have one other thing to say. I would like to thank Mike Miner for being here this evening. Mike does our filming of our meetings and we appreciate everything you do for us. But I want to mention that tonight is Mike Miner's anniversary.
So is mine. 14 years. Oh, you beat me.
So happy anniversary to you guys and thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Marcus, happy anniversary. mate.
Happy anniversary.
You too, sir.
Okay, so I am going to make a motion at this time to go into executive session to discuss personnel and negotiations. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.